What is the scariest true stories, you know? These stories still stick with me. I grew up in a house on Long Island in the town of Brentwood. It was a quiet town for its location. My dad worked as a taxi driver at the time, which meant he would usually end up coming home early in the morning and I would greet him. So it's Saturday, I'm watching cartoons, and my dad comes in and I run to say hello. My mum hears us from the bedroom and says, "Hello, honey, don't go in the pool, it's not ready yet." Me and my dad think, well, that's weird. It's 6 a.m., we weren't going to go in the pool, but just brush it off. And he goes on, tell me his usual stories of the crazies he picked up throughout the night. We then realized it was Saturday and my mum was at work, and it was only me and him in the house. The voice sounded just like my mother. Fast forward a couple of weeks, we had just moved into the house, and my new neighbors come over to welcome us to town. It was the two mothers, two sons, one my age, one a little older in 10th grade, two little girls, one blonde-haired girl and a shy brunette that didn't talk. We get to playing some soccer. However, the little brunette girl is nowhere to be found. The curious little kid I was, I ran around the property and I find her playing in the woods, a dangerous area for little nooblets to be exploring. She asked me to come play tag, but I decline, wanting to get everyone in on the game. The reactions of everyone as I asked for them to join us was puzzling, along with the response from the mom, "We only have one daughter." Turns out a small brown-haired girl drowned in the pool 10 years ago. The mother soon passed from a heart attack. A terrifying but true story I experienced when I was 12. I moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with. Single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mum was at work, which is where this gets terrifying and sad. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mum. She knocks a certain way when coming in and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. Wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in, and this is where is don't know details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her and left her body naked in a bathtub, hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. True story time. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the 1st floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open her room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the door frame of my mum's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mum and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the 1st floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry. Only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mum swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. I was sitting in my room after getting out of work on the second floor. Little bro is downstairs watching TV. The dog is in the hallway outside my door sleeping. All of a sudden, dog starts making all kinds of racket, jumping round, barking, clacking nails, howling. I go to get up to see what's up, and I hear, "Oh, that's a good girl," in a male voice. It didn't sound like little bro, so I go, "Oh, you're home early," thinking it is my dad's friend, our roomie, as I open the door. Soon as I'm out there is no one at all but the dog wagging her tail, staring at the empty end of the hallway. Little bro comes upstairs to yell at me for getting his dog riled up, said he heard the same voice thinking it was me or our roommate. We did a once-over of the house with my butterfly knife and his BB gun, and there was nobody. Still gives me the spooks to this day. About 5 years ago, my mum started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. I'll just refer to her as my wife for this story. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just a little creepy. He was quiet. He kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes and moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. One time, my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire several hours just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she dropped all of her problems on us, and we listened carefully and told her our opinions and suggested that she would be better off without him. She already had her mind made up, though, and decided to break up with him on Christmas Eve. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. The next day we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mum's house on the way so that we could see if she was okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about my mum's now ex-boyfriend. My mum's car was in the driveway, but that doesn't mean much because she lives close enough to work that she often walks, and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locks her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we see blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor and had made a puddle. My wife screamed and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mum's head in the freezer. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer so that it fell onto the ice dispenser and melted. My sister and I were playing outside when we were younger, and an elderly couple was walking by our yard. Our yard had a cemetery in the back, so it was quite a common local attraction for tourists, as this house was built in the 1800s, and most of the graves were from children who died back then from the flu, etc. There are some creepy stories from that place, but nothing lives up to what happened all those years ago. Playing outside, and this old couple kept pestering my sister about what her name was as they approached us and got closer. We were just little kids and got terribly scared and ran inside and told our mum what had happened. The following week, I heard a story on the news about an elderly couple approaching a teenage girl, kidnapping her and raping her, and it was the same couple that had approached my sister and I. I still get creeped out by that. About 2 years ago, my ex and I went through a really nasty breakup. Lots of crying and nasty words said. It became apparent that she had a lot of emotional problems and really wasn't the person I thought she was. Lots of anger and lots of lying, as I discovered. And to make things stranger, she is the one who dumped me multiple times and was absolutely furious when I finally accepted it and told her it was time for her to go. I wasn't exactly perfect here either, but that's what happens. I had also started a new and healthy relationship at this point, maybe 3 weeks after the primary breakup, which pissed her off to no end. Anyway, she shows up one day to collect some belongings that were still at my place, and she sits me down on the bed and hands me a not telling me to read it out loud. It's a really nasty speech about how I'm incapable of love and a terrible person and deserve to die. I refuse, but she's screaming at me, and I just was like, fine, I'll read it if it'll make you go away. So I finish the speech, and then she pulls out a loaded gun from her purse and spends about the next 15 minutes trying to muster the will to pull the trigger and splatter my brain all over the wall. She says she knows the law, she knows she'll be caught, she knows where she'll go to prison, and she's fine with it because I'll be off this planet. So I spend this time trying, poorly, not to totally freak out, and with tears streaming down my face, telling her that she's not a killer and just needs to go live her life without me. We parted with a hug, and I just learned she got engaged to a new guy a couple months ago. I have a few paranormal events that happened all throughout my life. Most of them are pretty tame, but there is one that got to me and still sticks with me today. About 4 years ago, I was ending my freshman year at college. I had lived in the dorms with a kick-ass roommate and pretty much had a great experience altogether. Towards the end of my last semester, something seemed different in my hall of the dorms. We were all still our lively selves, but just walking into the dorms would give you this massive feeling of dread. We all wrote it off as the stress of finals approaching, but it just felt off. Well, one night after studying, I decide to hit the shower so I can just wake up and make my way to class in a few hours. Before I keep going, I should go ahead and set the layout of our hall and the bathroom. Our hall was one of many halls on a single floor. Each hall had 4 rooms that accommodated 2 people each, or a single room for the RAs. The entrance to the halls were massive steel doors, with a small window located at one end, and across from it was the bathroom. It seriously felt like a prison block, rather than a living quarter for college students. As for the bathroom itself, when you walked in, you were immediately met with 2 sets of sinks, 2 sinks aside, on your left and right, with massive mirrors facing each other and creating that infinite loop of mirrors. Then past that, you had your 2 urinals and a toilet stall on your left and 2 showers on your right. When facing the left set of sinks, you can clearly see into the showers from the mirror if the door is open. And in the right set of sinks, you can see the reflection of the shower. The door of the bathroom was identical to the entrance to the hall, a massive steel frame with a small window that didn't allow for much of a view, with good reason. The door was propped open with a giant wooden wedge that couldn't be moved unless you were really trying to close that door. So back to the story. I'm all alone in the bathroom, gearing up to go shower. I throw my change of clothes on the right side sink, so that way I can reach around the stall and grab them. Once I set my stuff down, I happen to look up into the mirror, and I can see in the distance something almost shimmering inside the shower stall. As I look at it, I notice that it slowly gets closer, like it's jumping from the furthermost layer to the next layer closer. I'm kind of unsettled, but I don't think much of it, other than me coming down off of a massive Red Bull, Adderall, and caffeine kick. But it starts transitioning faster. As it gets closer, I can start making out details, but nothing vivid or striking. It's just a dark mass that looks like it's covered in hair. At this point, I'm freaking out hardcore since this thing is getting closer in the mirror, and I'm pretty much frozen to this one spot. As it gets to the 4th layer, I get the closest look at this thing I'll ever get, and I regret every minute of it. It wasn't hair, but some kind of long, flowing veil. You could see through it partially, but from the torso down, it was just solid black, and the face, I can't describe it. It was clearly human, but at the same time, it was so far removed. There were eyes. They were black, but definitely glowing somehow. I only saw this for maybe a second at the most, but it's burned into my mind forever. Then the lights cut out, and I hear the door slam. It's pitch black in the bathroom, so I can't see this thing anymore. I go to open the door, but it won't budge, and then this intense smell of blood hits me out of nowhere, and that's all I remember. I woke up later in the hospital from what my RA claims he was on his way to go use the bathroom sometime after this happened, where he found me in the shower stall with my shirt covered in blood from a massive nosebleed. He tried asking me what happened, and according to him, all I could respond with was, It saw me, and I start freaking out. So he calls an ambulance, and they get me to the hospital. All the while, I'm apparently freaking out, so they sedate me to get me to calm down. I'm coming to around the time my parents show up. Worried sick, of course. I ask them what happened, and according to the doctors, they believe I had a seizure. However, they ran CAT scans soon after I was cooperative enough to do so, and found no sign of any seizure occurring, not to mention epilepsy doesn't run in my family at all, and having taken Adderall countless times in the past, and since then, I've never had a similar side effect, neither hallucinations or potential seizures. To this day, I still can't bring myself to look into a mirror for more than a minute, and just being stuck in a room with one for an extended period will just cause me to break down.